Alrighty, guys, welcome back to I Coach Nutrition Radio. Guys, today I have a very special guest, someone that I had the pleasure of working with over the last 6 months, and she just graduated from I Coach University. So without further ado, Prabhakar, how are you, my friend? What's going
I'm
on?
doing great.
Awesome, awesome. So as we were chatting a little bit before I kicked off the podcast here, tell the audience, tell the listeners a little bit more about you, kind of what you do, kind of the family life and all of that. Just kind of give them a little bit more insight into who you are as a person there.
So I'm a 42-year-old a mom of two kiddos. My elder one's turning 11, and the younger one's turning 6 in another month. And I'm a general dentist. I have a practice here in Little Elm, Frisco area, and I've been practicing for more than 15 years as a dentist. So dentistry itself is hard as a profession on your body. So you have to keep up, with nutrition and exercise, just to make sure your back and core is in shape to practice, dentistry itself. But on top of that, when you're a mom with two kids, and your own practice, things get a bit crazy, and it's hard to focus on yourself and eat right during that time, because kids are picky eaters. And you don't have enough time. Luckily, I have a very supportive spouse who's in with me, in trying to eat healthy. So we try to cook as much as home, possible. We try to limit eating out, but over years, my biggest issue was, I kept losing weight nonstop. I was having insomnia. I No matter whatever diet I would try, and I'm mostly a vegetarian person. Eating South Asian Indian meals. Most weeknights. But I wasn't feeling strong. Like people would start telling me that you look frail, you look, weak. What happened? Did you lose weight? Um, and that kind of got me thinking, if I'm eating right, I'm so. And I was looking for, a nutritionist. So, and I think I posted on Facebook mom group or something, and someone recommended Justin. We talked. I actually talked to a couple of nutritionists, and I think I chose Justin because he had worked with similar issues which I was facing. So and I listened to another podcast, which Justin recommended. So that's why I eventually chose Justin to work with.
That's awesome. I love it. So if we think about, and we'll kind of dive into the journey a little bit more along the way, but man, I mean, if you're thinking about that, right, and the characteristics of, weak, frail, or, all those
Yes.
characteristics like 6 months ago, and then you think about kind of like characteristics now, and a lot of what we've talked about, like getting you to start doing strength training, and getting you to start being more aware of eating enough, right, and eating at maintenance calories and eating an adequate amount of protein intake. So if you had to think about like how some of these people were defining you back then, and then now you think about how you would define yourself now, or maybe even some of the comments you've heard now, what would that like, what's that description now versus
So
then?
I feel much more confident now. I feel like what I'm eating is the right, nutrition. It's right amount. It's right quality and quantity for me. When I started out, and we started doing the habit tracker and fitness app, and I was tracking my habits, and I realized I was eating so little. I was trying to eat healthy, but nowhere in my mind I thought I was eating, way less than what I was supposed to eat, and there was no protein in my diet at all. It was heavily carb ridden diet, and I thought I was eating a lot of vegetables, but when I recorded, in habit tracker, I wasn't eating enough vegetables or fruits at all. Sometimes, days in a row, I was missing, fiber in breakfast. I would just have a peanut butter toast and just go.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things, you know, that we build through this process of coaching and going through iCoach University is awareness, right? Like
Yes.
you,
Yes.
when you use these tools, I always say, if you don't track it, you don't change it, right? And because with the tools, they help you to bring you awareness, right? They help you to gain
Yes.
clarity on what it is that's actually going on, rather
Yeah.
than, you know, telling yourself whatever story you're telling yourself in your
Yes,
head,
I
right?
was actually getting my hormones tested and, going to doctor and, looking into, seeing if I was having any medical issue and everything was normal. Like I couldn't guess, what was going on and doctor said everything was normal. So apparently it was not enough nutrition in my diet.
Yeah. Well, and so if you think about kind of like, obviously you said you feel more confident now, both in nutrition and training. But even from a body composition standpoint, like what was like the lowest weight that you got down to before we started working together? And then where have you kind of maintained at now?
So the lowest weight, I think when I started out, I was 109 pounds. And my daughter is 11 and she's 100 pounds, so so that itself was like, oh my gosh. And then now I'm at 117 pounds. I got to 116, which was pretty stable, for consistent for a long time. And I feel like, around that weight I feel confident. I feel like, I'm not frail, or I'm doing strength training and building right kind of weight.
Yeah. Well, and I would argue, I mean, maybe not all of those 5, 6, 7 pounds or whatever, but probably the majority of it is lean muscle mass that you've
Yes.
built, right?
Yes.
Because we've seen the progression, we've seen you getting stronger, right? We know that if you're getting stronger, you're building lean muscle mass. We're seeing, obviously the weight maintained more consistently than, probably ever before there. So, and just like, as we've talked about so much, like the confidence that you get in the gym from strength training, or in this case, maybe not in the gym, but at home, right? The
Oh,
confidence
yes,
that you
yes.
get from doing strength training, it carries over into every other aspect of life. Like obviously, you and your profession, like of course it helps your back and things like that, but it also just helps you just with like confidence in general, as a mom, as a wife, as a professional. And
Yes.
I think that's a piece that so many people don't realize, especially like for women, especially just in the culture, is like we've grown up, right? Always seeing women with these little like 2 pound dumbbells, or like, only do cardio, don't do strength training or whatever. And it's like the farthest thing from the truth. It does so much for you, not just for your aesthetics, but for your health.
Yes, and I had never done any kind of weight training in the past. I'd always done cardio. I did Orange Theory for almost 5 years, but it was a little bit of weightlifting, but mostly cardio.
Yeah. Well, and like for you, especially like something with your frame, right? If you're like
It was the
losing
whole
weight,
thing.
yeah, I
I was
mean,
constantly losing weight, eating little.
yeah.
I thought I was staying healthy, but I was doing too much cardio and very little nutrition. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's easy to do, right? I mean, doing Orange Theory, like, I mean, obviously you're burning more calories doing that than like a strength training, workout most of the time. So it's
Yes.
just hard to keep up, like a lot of the times
I
trying to
needed to
keep,
eat a lot more than yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. I love it. So when you think about kind of the protein intake side of things, right? Like obviously anybody that follows a vegetarian or vegan diet, like protein intake is going to be more challenging. But for you, we were able to significantly increase that up. I don't know if you remember, but like what were the numbers? Like how many grams a day were you getting like before we started, or right when we first started? And then where do you kind of stay at now pretty consistently?
So it was definitely under 77 gram. I think I was barely getting like 30 to 40 gram maybe. And yeah, and then you increased it, from 77 to 100 or so. And when once we started doing the program, I upped it up, and my minimum was, a 70, and on the higher days it was 100 or so. Yep. We
Got
increased
it.
protein significantly, yeah.
So that's pretty, I mean, that's pretty amazing, right? I mean, going from 30, 40 grams a day all the way up to 100. And for those of you listening, obviously that did not happen overnight, guys. That took time, right? Because we would never want to make that much of an increase, super fast. But how, like, what, I guess one, how long about did that take us to get up to that number? And then what did you notice from like a satiation standpoint, as well as like a building muscle and maintenance of weight standpoint?
I think it was key in maintaining and gaining weight, because I realized when I was consistently tracking my protein, I would not feel hungry all the time. Like, before that, before I started this program, I was frustrated that, after every 2 hours, I would be hungry. I was reaching out for snacks. And I would try to eat healthy snacks, but, it just wasn't filling me. So once we increased the protein in our three major meals, I wasn't eating out as many snacks. After my breakfast, I would barely have one snack, and then I would move to lunch, and then after lunch, maybe a little snack in between, and then dinner. But I wasn't feeling hungry. That was surprising to me. I wasn't feeling as hungry as I've always been.
Yeah. Well, and once you learn, I mean, obviously now, but once you learn kind of on the protein side and then with the vegetables and fruits and the fiber side, I mean, those are really those two things that help us to feel satiated, right?
Yes, protein
So
and fiber as well. Yeah, increase that a lot as well. Yeah.
yeah. So a lot of people, they like, it's very, very common here. They're having that issue where they're hungry, right? And a lot of the time it's because they're not getting enough protein, not getting enough fiber in a meal.
Yes.
And I mean, that's the difference. Like if you undereat those two things, that's the difference. And you get, being hungry an hour or
And
two
that's
later.
exactly I was doing, yeah, I was doing exactly that. Like I was eating very little fiber, barely any protein, and I was hungry all the time.
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand why I'm not gaining weight, because most people who gain weight eat a lot of carbs.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, it's like a lot of people gain weight who eat all these carbs. Well, if we think about it, right, the carb intake piece of the equation here. Well, if I'm under eating protein, I'm under eating carbs, or I'm sorry, if you're under eating protein, you're under eating fiber, you're probably going to end up overeating carbs and fats, right, and those things. So, yeah, it's a very, very common problem for sure, and I think like people just lack the awareness, right? If you tracked, right, if you got into like MyFitnessPal, you track this and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm significantly under eating these things, then you can slowly start working on increasing them and getting them, kind of where they need to be there. So I love that. So one thing I was going to ask, obviously you have two little ones there, right? One obviously is a little bit older now at 11, but what were, if anything, I know we've kind of talked about this a little bit, well, what were some of those like changes just with you, and even with your husband too, like you're kind of like leading from the front with this, like you're doing this, you're working on these things in your own life. How did some of those things kind of transfer over, even with your family there as well?
Well, the good thing was, those kind of meals, my family loves them. My kids love those meals as well. So they enjoy it, so we didn't have to cook two, three different meals to please everybody. We were cooking like just one meal, which was, a perfect meal with enough protein and carb and veggies, and, everybody was eating the same thing. And, they were all enjoying it. So I think that was a, good takeaway.
Well, and I think to highlight that point, really the main reason why that transition was pretty easy for y'all is because it's not like we were like, oh, stop eating the foods that you're used to eating, stop eating the way that you were eating, like you still were eating. I mean, like you said there, right? You're still eating a lot of the same foods that you're eating before, but just learning how to kind of build out your plate, right? And portion them more appropriately. So that side of it, and just putting more emphasis in kind of the portion sizes and how to build out the plate, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and I felt more confident that I was feeding my kids a good diet as well. Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I think that piece is really big, right? Because a lot of people, they try to go and start doing a diet, and so it changes their diet completely, right? Which if you change your diet completely, I mean, that is like a pretty drastic change, right? Whereas you don't necessarily have to do that. You can just go in and learn how to follow whatever kind of the diet, eat the foods that you like to eat, right? I mean, you might have to clean it up a little bit depending upon what you like to eat, right? But, and learning how the quantity side of the equation and the quality side of the equation, and both of those things matter, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really cool because I think a lot of people think that, you know, if they're going to start a diet or a program or something like, you know, they think that their family's not going to like it, and so they think that they have to like cook, you know, different meals for
No, it
them,
was
and
totally the opposite. It was like, what I was cooking earlier was, like a traditional Indian meal, and kids wouldn't want that as much. But, now that, we were all cooking the same meal, they loved it. Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I think, you know, as we've talked about so much, it's like, you know, being able to be that example for our kids, right?
Yes.
And being able to see us, you know, them see us live a healthy lifestyle and kind of be that example for them. Not to say that they're 100% going to follow, but at least you're setting an example for them, right?
Good
So,
example. Yes. Yeah. Because it also comes, from the fact that my mom had rheumatoid arthritis at a very young age. She got it at the age of 40, and as soon as I hit 40, I've been worrying about the same thing. When you have fatigue, and your joints hurt, and you start worrying, like you want to change your lifestyle, and you don't want to go down that path. So that was another, I think when we discussed the very first time, was one of the biggest factor in me, trying to do a nutrition program. Yep.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and I mean that why factor, right? That's a very strong why. It's kind of, you know, I know we like the podcast that I had shared with you, right? And we talked a lot about like, you know, not doing strength training, under eating protein, and that, you know, leading to like osteoporosis and, you know, like
Yes.
wanting to be capable in those later years and not having the
Yes.
falls and all of that. And so yeah, I think that was a very big why factor
Right.
for you.
Yes.
That's
Absolutely.
motivated for you,
Yes.
especially being just in the medical field, right? I mean,
Correct.
I think for a lot of us in the medical field, like, you know, when we know these things, right, like it definitely establishes a pretty strong why for us to want to prioritize these things in our own life, you know.
Correct. Yes.
So I love it. So if you think back to kind of like the moms group situation, right? Because there's a lot of Facebook moms groups out there, right? And I can only imagine the questions that are in there around like nutrition and losing weight, and especially around like, you know, having a baby, and then like moms like wanting to lose their baby weight or whatever thereafter, which that's a whole other conversation in of itself. But what, you know, if you think about kind of some of these moms groups that you've been in, and if you think about some of like the nutrition conversations that have come up, or looking for a nutritionist, or different things like that, like if you think about everything you know now versus before you started, right? Like, what would be some of those recommendations that you would give to people in those Facebook groups now if they wanted to, you know, maybe they were having a similar issue to you, or maybe they have any type of like nutrition or fitness goals, like because I think a lot of people, they're looking for these like challenges, they're looking for Facebook groups, they're looking
Yes.
for group programs, but if you think about all that versus like the one-on-one coaching experience,
Yeah.
like would
What's the
maybe
difference?
shed some light into that for the
Yeah,
listeners.
because in the past I have done group classes. I've always gone to gyms, and I've always tried to eat healthy. I felt like I was one of those oddballs who was trying to gain weight here, because everybody around me was trying to lose weight here. So I could never find the right answer to my issues. So once I realized that if I can work on a personalized way, that would be like with a personal coach who can actually listen to my needs, versus a cookie cutter thing for everybody. Because if you go to a group class, they're all sweating and they're all trying to lose weight over here, that might not be the best solution for you. So you need to listen to your body, and you need to see what your needs are, and select your coach on that, in that way, I guess. So that's what I would recommend to anybody who's either trying to get in great shape, or trying to lose weight, or gain weight, or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that individualization, right? And like that coach meeting you are wherever you are in your journey.
Yes.
And then having that one-on-one accountability. I mean, it's the one-on-one versus the group, it's just different, you
It's
know, at the
very
end of the day.
different. Yes, yeah. And then you see my lifestyle, the other coaches, the regular classes, they don't know my lifestyle. They don't know what I'm dealing with, with kids and, work and all that. So when you work with a coach, they know exactly and they meet you where you are. And that's what you did. You met me where I was. I can do this. Okay, let's just try this one. So that's, I think, one of the best part of having a personal coach. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. No, I 100% agree. And I mean, I think to expand on that even a little more, it's like when we think about navigating, I mean, 6 months, right? That's a long time, right?
Yeah.
And so you think about everything that we navigate through that 6 month period of time. Like there's a lot of things we navigated through. And I think that's such an important process of the journey is that it's one thing to do a 21-day challenge, a 30-day challenge, or whatever, but it's a whole other thing to do something for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months,
It,
years, right?
it changes your whole, outlook. Yep. So that's what it did for me. It changed my outlook towards, how I ate food, or how I portioned it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of things. Yeah.
Well, and it allowed you to kind of give yourself like kind of know when to give yourself grace and then know when to like kind of kick yourself and like step it up a little bit, right? But it's like
Yeah.
navigating through all of the different things with work and kids and like we pushed for a long time to try to get us to do 4 strength workouts or 5 strength workouts or whatever. And then we just had to kind of come back to the reality of, hey, if we can get the 2 to 3, that's better than nothing. That's better than
Yes.
what we were doing before. So like if we can get more, great, but like let's just make sure we're staying consistent with at least
Yes.
this.
Yes.
So, there's always this like optimal or like perfect approach that we would love to get you to,
Yes.
but
And I was chasing that, but yeah, but I feel like, it's a lot better than doing what your life circumstances and your body is capable right now. Than trying to do something totally out of reach and then beating yourself for not being able to do that.
yeah. Well, and maybe talk on that a little bit because a lot of people do that, right? A lot of people beat themselves up. Even when people are doing really good, they still beat themselves up. They're always like nitpicking and like always looking for the things that they did bad or whatever. And I think like you did a really good job with giving yourself grace because at the end of the day, you've got a lot on your plate. And if you
Yes.
don't give you, if you wouldn't have given yourself grace, or if I wouldn't have, right, then you wouldn't have had the success that you would have had because you would have just gone back to, oh, I just don't have time for this right now. I can't
Yes.
prioritize this right now,
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
And a lot of us are guilty of saying that at some time in our life, but it's like when I hear that, it makes me just like, I'm like, what do you mean you don't have time to prioritize this right now? You don't have time to prioritize your own health? Like what?
Yes.
Like what is that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's the all in, all out, right? Getting rid of that mindset, shoveling that mindset, and coming back to like, how do I scale things back? Right? Like sometimes you might be able to be all in, and other times you might need to scale that back to 80% or 50%
Yes.
or whatever, right? So yeah, I kind of think about it like driving and like there's different speed zones. Like sometimes you got to slow down and speed up and stop, and it's just
And that's what life is about too. Like, sometimes you fall sick and, or you don't sleep well, and next day your body, I don't think it's wise to, push yourself to that limit that time, or you're
yeah.
going to stay sick for a long time. And then, but you did keep me accountable sometimes. I remember, when I gave you some excuses I couldn't do it, and you were like, no, but you have to prioritize it. And next week I went back into it. So that kind of accountability comes from one-on-one coaching as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the beautiful part about it, right? You got to know, whether it's a coach or you, like whether I'm coaching you or you're coaching yourself, you got to
Yeah.
know when to give yourself grace, and you got to know when to kind of kick yourself in the butt and say, let's go, like let's step it up, like let's
Yeah.
let's push ourselves. So but it's definitely a kind of that delicate balance throughout life, through different seasons of life that you're navigating through there.
Yeah.
And I think the ability to be able to do that, learned as a skill set over a period of time, right? That's ultimately the thing that keeps you from self-sabotaging yourself and quote unquote falling off or whatever, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I love that. So if you think to yourself, like on the kind of like the biofeedback side of things, right? Like, I mean, knowing where we're at before we started, right? And things like sleep, energy levels, digestion, stress, performance and workouts, hunger response, recovery, kind of all those biofeedback factors. Like, what do you think were some of the biggest changes for you, before you started to kind of now with those kind of biofeedback markers?
Um, so I think the first was that I definitely don't feel hungry as much. I feel satiated. And that way I feel more energetic as well. I definitely feel a rise in my energy levels for sure, ever since I started this diet. Um, Eating healthy, not this diet. This is no
I
diet.
know I was about to correct you. I was going to say
Yeah,
lifestyle,
yeah,
lifestyle.
lifestyle. Yes, it's not a diet. Yeah, so because I am on it now. Like I haven't changed much ever since I stopped too. And then what else? Just the tracker itself makes me realize, the next day if I didn't drink enough water, if I didn't do enough steps, or if there was fiber lacking. So, next day I just, add that to my diet. So that way it has helped a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, so I think like for you, with these tools, right? You've learned them. You have them kind of in your little invisible nutrition tool
Yes.
belt, if you will, right? And you can use them whenever you need to use them again, right? And I think the confidence that you have from these tools and knowing that you have them, access to them whenever you need them, like that's
Yes.
empowering, right? And that's something that gives you confidence going forward with, hey, like I'm in control of my health, not
Yes.
my health is in control of me.
Yes. Or, well-meaning friends, or, parents would say, oh, you need to eat this, to gain more weight, or you need to eat that, and but now I know, what I'm eating is right, so there's no need to listen to any unsolicited advice here.
Hey, that's yeah, good. That's definitely a freeing thing all in of itself, right? It's like, and you can even think to yourself now. I mean, if just in that specific example, it's like if somebody told you to eat more of this, then it'd be like, well, if I wanted to gain weight, I would eat in a calorie surplus. That's what would
Yeah.
make me gain weight if I wanted to gain
Yeah,
weight.
yeah.
And that could
Yeah,
be
but
from eating that food or whatever food I chose to eat.
yeah, yeah. And then strength training, that's the key as well. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think, yeah, I mean, for you, I mean, being able to consistently, do strength training and doing it in a way where you're able to keep progressing in that and getting stronger and like continuing to see that confidence, carry over. I think every single person should, prioritize doing strength training. It doesn't have to be the only thing that they do, but I think that they should definitely do at least 2 or 3 days a week of it.
Yes.
For the fact it's going to help you feel better, look better, and perform better.
Yes, I
So
agree.
I love it. Awesome. Well, hey, so I don't want to keep up too much of your time here. What would kind of be like if you had to like wrap up? And I know you kind of did this in the post call update there, but if you kind of had to wrap up your thoughts or your biggest takeaways from kind of this 6 month journey that you could share with the listeners here, like I don't know, your top 3 tips that you've
Yeah.
learned type of thing. What would those be? What would those be for the listeners?
Well, there's so many. The first thing I did say, all those habit trackers. Those were the best tools, I could have. Number two would be, that Facebook group which you have, which posts all those recipes, and I got all those different healthy recipes which are so easy to make. I think that kind of support system which you provide is pretty good as well. And then I think the other biggest thing which I took from this program was, if I fall behind, next day just get up and do it. Consistency. If I don't do it for maybe 3 days in a row, but don't beat yourself up for that. Let the fourth day, let's just get so the sooner you get back into it, the better it is.
Yeah, I love that. I think that last one there definitely a big takeaway for so many, right? It's like any time that I have somebody, they're like, I had a bad day or a bad weekend or a
Yes,
bad
and I used to beat
vacation or
myself a lot
whatever.
for that. Now I know I'll get back to it. It's not a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's like you can take that time and energy, right, and invest it in beating yourself up about something that already happened in the past, or you can use that to fuel going forward and make sure that you get back, right back into kind of your normal routine there. So,
Yes. Yes.
I mean, yeah, it's so much more about how fast can you get back on it rather than what happened. And that's, like there's people out there, right? If you're like, you didn't get to 500 pounds or whatever by, making one bad decision. I mean, it's a compounding effect, right? And
Correct.
so
Yes.
it's self-sabotage after self-sabotage after self-sabotage. And
Which leads to
that's
that. Yes.
That's
I
literally the biggest difference. Like
Yes.
people that get to that place, it didn't just happen in a day or a week or a month. Like it happened over years and years and years of the self-sabotage.
Correct.
So yeah, if there was one reminder for everybody listening to this podcast right now, it would be, guys, you can't mess this up. Like if something happens, just get back on it. Like just get back on it. But I think that the lacking piece for so many people is, what does get back on it even mean? Right?
Yes, the strength workouts and the just the ideal plate which you were creating for yourself, but that those were for me.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
think like it's like, what are the big rocks for you guys? Like what's the big rocks in your life? What are the habits that actually move the needle and matter most for you, right? I typically talk about kind of sleep, nutrition, exercise, hydration, stress management. Like those five big rocks are really what I feel kind of move the needle the most, not only in my life, but in the lives of so many others. So you kind of got to define what those big rocks are for you. You got to figure out what actually works for you, right? So
yeah.
that you know what it is to get back on, quote unquote. But
Yeah.
I think
For
again,
me, another thing was, stress management as well. I would let stress get into the way of eating healthy and my workouts as well. If I was too stressed out, I would just not work out or, just not eat well as well. But with this program, I realized, I just need to, in fact, I need to do those things to feel better. So, I remove stress out of the equation and I would just do my thing and I actually started feeling better.
yeah. Well, and I think that just goes back to like the performance aspect of things, right? And being able to think about like you as a wife, you as a mom, you as a dentist here. It's like that's like your sport, right? So
Yeah.
like LeBron James spends $1 million a year on his performance recovery and all that. Like this is your
So
sport,
true.
right?
That's
So
a good analogy.
your sleep, your nutrition, your exercise, like all of those things there, that's what makes you go and perform your best in the game of life with these things that you have there, right? So
Very true. That's very well said. Yeah.
I think that's probably like the best thing that helped me with the transition from like competing in sports my whole life to competing in just like life with all of this type of stuff, being a dad and a husband and a business owner and all these things. It's like that's the sport now, right?
Yes,
So
very true.
no different than if I got 5 hours of sleep and tried to go compete in a football game versus compete in
Yes.
coaching clients or whatever. It's like that. All these things matter and they impact our performance. So,
Absolutely.
but I think a lot of people, they don't even know how good they can feel because they haven't felt that way in so long. And it's kind of one of those things where once you start to prioritize these things, once you start to get consistent with these things, you start to feel a lot better. And it's much harder to go back to feeling like crap when you know that you can feel this good. So
Yeah, true. I agree. And you make it so easy to eat well as well. Like some of the things which you gave me are like, even if I'm stressed out, I can easily make those. It doesn't take much time. Yeah.
yeah, well, and we want to have that spectrum, right? We want to have things that are like super super easy and don't take a long time, and then sometimes like we want to have more fun and make it more complex or whatever. But again, just the tools, right, and knowing how to navigate through different situations is key. So Prabhakar, last question I have for you. For anybody that's, obviously when you work with a coach one-on-one, like it's definitely an investment. You definitely spend more money working with a coach one-on-one than you would for a group program or a meal plan or whatever. Talk to me a little bit about, for the person that maybe is on the fence about investing in themselves, or maybe they did a discovery call and they're like, that's just too much. I can't afford that, or I don't know if it's worth it or whatever. What would your advice be there? Because obviously you had the experiences with the groups versus the one-on-one. So how did you kind of pull the trigger and invest in yourself like you did?
Again, as I said, turning 40 and, being at the age where my mom actually developed those, health issues was one of the biggest factor where I just wanted to make sure I am eating healthy. Like I just, wanted like good scientific way to know that, I am eating healthy and I am doing the kind of workouts my body needs to have good joints, have, good healthy muscles and joints, in the future. That was, I think, the biggest factor in me deciding that, it's worth it. Um, I think you have to be at a right age and time to decide, I would rather have this than an expensive handbag. Because that's my priority. What am I going to do with an expensive handbag and no, healthy joints and, healthy body? So I think it's just, a mindset thinking, what do you want, in, next 10 years, do you want to be traveling the world and, be healthy and not, having some health issues or be on medications? So I guess you got to think like that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we prioritize what's important to us, right? And,
Yes.
I mean, at the end of the day, I would do whatever I had to do for my wife or my kid or myself if I needed to, right? And
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
but
And then being there for my kids, I think kids always change your perspective as well. If my mom can't travel or see me because of knee issues, that makes me think, oh, I want to be there, for my kids. I want to be involved in their lives and in a healthy, fit way as well.
yeah, 100%. I mean, I think anybody that has kids, it's probably a motivator for them, right?
Yeah, it's a big
So
motivator. Yes.
and I think that the other thing that you hit right on the head is you have to be, you were ready to change. You were ready to make these changes in your life. And I think that's so, so, so important is that like I could be the world's leading expert in nutrition. It could be the best program in the, but it's like you have to be ready to change. Like no amount of money that you pay is ever going to make you ready to change, and no coach or whatever is going to make like you have to be the one, because I don't, obviously I try to help as much as I can, but I can't hold your hand every day all day long, right?
Yes.
So you got to be ready to change. I think anytime before you invest in yourself, invest in a coach, invest in a program, like you have to, number one, do your due diligence and make sure that it's the right fit, but you have to make sure that, hey, you're going to be coachable, and you're ready to start making these changes in your life.
Correct as well. Yeah. Yeah. And your life circumstances allow you to do that as well. Yep.
Yeah, 100%.